Alright, so today I'm going to go over the fundamentals of Penta, which is a trans-auric form that is 3, 4, or 5 people who come together and then this form kind of emerges. And Penta, has a lot of applications. You can look at family, you can look at business, you can just even notice Penta at parties or notice it with your friends and so on. But as a foundation, I want to just talk about, I'm just going to give you the kind of keys to start doing your own Penta, analysis. I'm not going to go into the keynotes. I'm not going to go into the complexities of it. But I will say, I'll give you the keys of looking at the centers that are defined, and if there are any undefined centers, and if so, how many and which centers for the Penta, right? Like if you take all the people in the Penta together. We'll look at how Penta works, like what happens when a sixth person, enters into the Penta. Well, it breaks into two Pentas. And we'll just kind of go over the fundamentals of how you can notice Penta at work and really what it is. I'll also go over how the left column, how the logical column, is basically the internal life of a family, for instance. The center column is the material sustenance and the material direction and so on of that, and oftentimes the material success of that family or of that group or business. And the right column is they're kind of going out into the world, and we can look at that a little bit. But again, I'm not going to go into much keynoting. I would like to later go into all of Ra's keynotes for the different possible configurations, and there are some really good graphics out there you can find through Google image search. Looking up human design Penta, you'll find some. But in any case, let's get started. Okay, so Penta is just about the closest thing human design has to conspiracy theory. You may have heard, different conspiracy theories, different things. Those are misunderstandings, right? They're really misunderstandings. I like Slavoj Žižek's response that conspiracy theorists present to you the horror that a shadowy group of people are making the decisions and in charge. It's even more terrifying to think they aren't, that it's completely out of control. Because if it's a shadowy group of people, all you have to do is, replace those people or wake up to that. But if it's something far more nefarious, far more subtle, something that requires not only intelligence, but grace and good luck and all sorts of things. I mean, in other words, what human design gives you is the real conspiracy, and it's called Penta. And what a Penta is basically an alien life form. This is Ra's joke that families are alien. If you feel a certain way in a family, just imagine, no matter what age you are, you go back to someone who has been a member of a Penta, and especially if they're a very conditioned, very, homogenized person, who they become kind of Penta representatives. And you come back and say they have gate 13, that's the Penta representative who's been enlisted to take photos, and you go there and they go, oh, here's a picture of Sally when she was 4 years old picking her nose, and here's little Jimmy when he tripped and fell and scraped his knee, and this is how Penta works. So I just want to kind of start at a foundational level that Penta is not human, right? The human form that we are is what we are as ourselves. And of course, even if I'm in a Penta, I still have my normal human chart. It's just that I suddenly find myself unable to leave the group. I find the group gravity, for instance, sometimes, right? Or I find, there can be literal versions of this. If you go on a road trip with people, they will slow you down. And you don't have a choice. It's not like you can leave them in the desert or something. So the Penta is going to make you move at its pace. It's going to make you move at its speed. There's all these things we can see by realizing that as soon as you have more than two people, and it really shows how special being alone is and how special partnership is, because those are two very unique ways of being. Only in your aloneness, with individual circuitry, does individual circuitry go to all 9 centers, which tells us that only as individuals are we truly limitless. As soon as you're in partnership, you're in a limitation. You are in a limitation. People think that partnerships give you something. Well, yes, they bring out dormant qualities and so on based on activation and based on electromagnetics and things like that. Most of them do anyway, unless you're dating someone born the same day and close to the same time as you. But in any case, in the same year, of course. But in any case, it's partnership that actually is a lesser matrix of individuality. And then after partnership, when we get to Penta, sure, there's still the individual partnership analysis charts. And those play a big role, especially in three-person pentas. Do not think that just because we're in the realm of Penta that all of the things we've learned from partnership analysis and all the things we've learned from looking at the individual chart go out the window. No, absolutely, especially in three-person pentas, because those are going to dissolve into partnership more often than any others. As soon as you have a three-person penta, as soon as one person leaves, the penta is gone. It vanishes, right? So again, as a trans-auric form, these forms can appear and vanish, and they appear and vanish only when the constituent parts are present. So 3 humans, generating an aura, but, the dog's aura does not partake in Penta, right? So, and a sleeping human's aura might not partake in Penta either, for that matter. Or it might. It would be an interesting experiment. Okay, so what's happening is you have one person, you by yourself, and you might be experiencing the background transits, maybe even very strongly if you're a reflector or if you're a manifestor for whom the transits are primary. And you can notice that. You can notice the moon click through the lines, you can notice the sun-earth click through the colors, and so on, and you can see the changes that occur. Then you notice in partnership, you notice the electromagnetics. You notice that with any individual other person, the two of you together create something that is bigger than the two of you, which is a very specific relationship that only you will ever have with that person. Nobody else will ever have that relationship. That is your quote-unquote chemistry with that person, right? And this can be shown in the partnership analysis. And partnership analysis is a fantastic tool for showing this. It's incredible what it can show. And with Penta, the first Penta is a 3-person Penta, because we're all born more or less into 3-person pentas. I mean, I guess not entirely, but, historically, the mother and the father have given birth to the child, and so as soon as the child appears, there's a Penta. And so the 3-person Penta is, in any case, the first Penta. Even if it's only by a fraction of a second, the 3-person Penta exists. Say you have 2 people in a room, and then one person comes in, and then 30 seconds later, someone else comes in, right? Or even if they're only by an arm's length apart. So the 3-person Penta is kind of the next step. So what is a 3-person Penta? Okay, the 3-person Penta, this is really the beginning Penta. And what you're going to notice about this Penta is that it has a tremendous pressure to add a fourth. And this can even be felt as a corollary to the genetic pressure that a peoples will not survive unless they can produce at least 2 of them for every couple, right? Because for every couple to replace themselves, they need to have 2 kids. They can't just have 1 kid, right? So this is all kind of Ra's, rationale for it. And the idea is that as soon as you have 1 kid, there's a genetic imperative that kicks in that wasn't even there before. It's actually, there could be 2 people, partnership, there's no pressure. As soon as you have a kid, the pressure of the Penta is on. And that pressure of the Penta goes, you need another one because 1 is not enough to maintain the gene pool. You actually need 2.2, but the genes, say, make another kid. So the pressure of the 3 to immediately become the 4. And 3 has a theme of compromise tension. That is one of the keynotes. So I guess I lied. I am talking about some keynotes. But generally, I think 3 is compromise tension, 4 is safe at home. It's been a while since I looked over the keynotes, so I'll have to do it in a more in-depth, a more in-depth examination. But it's kind of fun not having the keynotes too, because you can just kind of see how the keynotes were arrived at by trying to arrive at them yourself or trying to understand the dynamic behind it. So let's just give the example of compromise tension. It's called compromise tension because every group of 3 people, every Penta of 3, is going to have a certain amount of tension in it, and the tension is going to come out in the compromises. And compromise, of course, is a term we know from partnership analysis. It's referring to the same thing here. It's not like we're using the term in a different sense. We're talking about the same thing. We're talking about compromises. So, a group of 3 is not going to be so bad if nobody has any compromises with each other, which means a compromise is a technical term for when one person has half of a channel. They have a hanging gate, and the other person has the full channel. So what that means, compromise tension, does it mean that it's going to be really tense all the time. People are going to be annoyed when they're in the penta. No, what it means is as soon as the penta falls apart, all the tension from that penta comes out in the compromise. It's almost like, everyone's on best behavior when the penta's there. But then as soon as one person leaves the penta, the other two fight. And they fight where the compromises are. Yeah, so it's an interesting thing, how that works. And then you see they each have their own dynamics. Like 4 can be safe at home and have this great sense of comfort, but can also have people taking each other for granted. And 5 has its own peculiarities, which we'll go into when we. And I'm talking about the number of people. So at a foundational level, starting by observing a 3-person penta, then observing the 4, then observing the 5. So I would say number of people, that's the easiest to observe with penta. After that, there's a lot of ways to look at it. I mean, really the meat of penta is in the dysfunction. So if you have the luxury of having everyone's chart, what you do is you do the chart for every member of that family or every member of that founding team or every member of that group, however you're going to do it. And then what you're going to look at, a few things. One is how many centers you have defined together. It's very rare, for instance, to have 5 people in a penta and not have all 9 centers defined. But it happens. So you want to look at how many centers are defined. That's going to tell you interesting information as well. If there are too many centers undefined, that penta, people are going to be continually leaving that penta to go elsewhere because nobody in that group is giving each other that. I have an undefined solar plexus, and if I'm in a penta with a bunch of other people with undefined solar plexus, and then there's always going to be a temptation to leave that group to go hang out with someone who has a defined solar plexus or who electromagnetically defines it. And of course, if we electromagnetically define it with each other, then we're self-sufficient as a penta. We don't need to go out there. We'll have that center defined as a penta. So you do have to do quite a bit of analysis to see what the penta has, what it doesn't. But starting with number of people, then looking at the number of centers defined, then I would say the real meat of penta is looking at the dysfunction. And to look at the dysfunction of the penta, there are 12 penta gates. They are all of the gates between the sacral to the G center and then the G center to the throat. So that center column, right, of 3 channels and then 3 channels. If any one of those 12 gates is missing, it's a dysfunctional penta. And it's very rare for all 12 of those gates to be there. So what you want to look at is where those gates are missing. If they're missing in the left column, the logic column, that's going to be internal disorder and disarray and lack of accountability, lack of discipline, and so on. If they're going to be the middle column, that's going to be the inability to be, materially successful and to sustain materially. And if it's the right column, they're not going to be able to go out in the world as much and really demonstrate out in the world. But again, penta, it's not such a great thing. It really isn't. It's not about penta. It's not called penta design. It's called human design.